Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. You know, these concerns about and the wringing of the hands about this budget would have a whole lot more credibility if we'd heard that when the 3 times in the last 50 years we had 3 presidents in the late 70s and the mid 90s, and just recently cut our military spending by 25%. That's what this is about today. We're trying to recover. You've done a marvelous job in the Navy and the Marines getting our readiness back. I want to commend you guys for that. Today I want to talk about shipbuilding. When we get this budget, we're supposed to get a shipbuilding plan. Secretary Motley, when should we expect that?
Sir, I'm hoping to get it over here as soon as possible, but frankly, it's not my call. I'm waiting for the Secretary of Defense to allow us to bring it over.
Admiral Kilby yesterday, as a matter of fact, did a great job explaining his requirements, Admiral. He talked about 4 priorities: Columbia class, readiness recovery, lethality, and capabilities we can afford. I respect that. The question, and I want to highlight the NDS. The 355 ship number was developed in 2016. Prior to the NDS, is the 355 number consistent with the NDS requirements put on Navy and Marines?
It's low, sir. So,
An honest man. Thank you, sir.
The short answer, so since the time the data assessment has been done, and if you consider the fact that we're integrating much more closely with the Marine Corps and within the Joint Force, you have to consider not only what we're going to fight with, the capabilities, but also how we're going to fight. And so that's translated against a threat that has increasing capability into a larger number of ships, a larger number of more capable lethal ships.
So it has to do with several things, right? What's your responsibility against emerging threats? You said that. What's how are you going to fight the force, and then what kind of lethality you have? So you're working on now that we're not hamstrung by INF. We know that China they outstick us today. Is that fair?
In some areas, sir,
okay.
Yes.
Secondly, they have about 350 boats today to our 296 by my math. I think that's correct, directionally.
Yes, sir.
If you look at what they've said publicly, by 2030, they'll have 425, and if that same gradient goes out by 2034, which is our planning period behind the current shipbuilding plan, we would be at 355 by 2034. That's the 2016 plan. That may change in the current shipbuilding plan, that I understand. But by my that we have an 80-boat shortage right now, and we have responsibilities in multiple AORs. They pretty much have one. Are you concerned that our shipbuilding plan is not going to be able to do what we need to do over that 15-year period, particularly against the buildup that we see China? They've deployed more boats in the last 30 months than they have in the last 30 years. So we see their activity. They're telling us what they're doing.
Yes, sir. So simply, it really comes down to our top line, right? That's our biggest constraint in terms of growing a bigger Navy. Since I've been in uniform, the size of the United States Navy has been dwindling. Over the last few years, we've come up in numbers a bit, but not a lot. And so we believe, based on the NDS and for all the reasons we just stated, that it's time to reinvest in the naval force.
Well, and it'd be one thing if we could fund it. What I'm worried about, let's take submarines, for example. Your number 1 priority is Columbia class. I'm proud that Georgia hosts one of the 2 nuclear bases that host those. But we've lost in the last decade, 17,000 vendors, submarine vendors, down to 3,000 vendors. Even if we were to push the money toward this goal to get to where we need to be, can we rebuild the supply chain fast enough to accommodate that?
Sir, based on what we know, we think we can. Based on what we're projecting in terms of submarines, as an example, in terms of what we're procuring, that vendor infrastructure is in place to support that.
Can I move on to one other thing? The Air Force is developing ABMS right now, and that looks like they've had one demonstration across the services. I think there's another one coming up in April. How involved is the Navy in looking at this from the service needs as well as the data that the Navy will be creating? Obviously, as I understand this is a very classified development. Can you give us an update about the Navy's involvement, the Marines' involvement on that?
Sir, so the problem set is that we have netted weapons and we have netted platforms and netted C2 nodes, but we don't have a net, right? And so all the services have come together under a concept called Joint All-Domain C2, and we're putting heat on it, a Manhattan Project-like effort, so that we're not delivering this in the mid-2030s, but in the 2020s. all the Joint Chiefs are flying out to Nellis in early April to take a look at this together to make sure we understand how we're going to get after it. It's a priority.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.